Take it away, Squatch.
Yes, welcome in everybody. We have the third place match coming up of the Aurora Seasonal Cup. I am joined back by Onig.
Hey guys.
Welcome back.
Sorry for the sudden disappearance.
That is all right. We've been able to truck along, and we're glad to have you back here for the third place match. Amoeba versus LIEKA, both of them losing out in their respective semifinals. Do you have any words on which one you're leaning more towards here?
I think they might be equally favored, at least based on what I saw. I guess we'll see how the game will pan out.
Right, Amoeba we saw in that previous semifinal, starting strong with the Rakoans, but then he wasn't able to close it out against Exploring. LIEKA, we just caught the end of the series, losing on that red versus Sunkichi's Yellow Flyers, Yellow Fairies. We are going to ready up, get both of these players into the deck selection screen. And now we shall see if Amoeba's red-yellow is left up. We saw that one banned away in the previous series. LIEKA, I believe we caught a brief glimpse of had his sack banned away by Sunkichi, but I'm not 100% sure on that because we only got a very brief glimpse.
If he might ban the red deck, LIEKA, I'm not sure, because he seems to be a lot of swarmish decks. Yeah, I guess LIEKA's banning the red deck.
Yeah, and has locked it in now, so exactly like you were saying, fearing what would potentially be a counter to his lineup. And Amoeba bans away the, I believe that is the sack, exactly as I think we saw Sunkichi do. Again, not 100% on that one, but I believe that's what it went for. So now we'll see, does Amoeba start with the Rakoans the same that he started in the semifinals, or does he keep that kind of as his backup deck? The LIEKA we see has locked in there. He's going to start with his red.
I wonder if his two commands are, his two neutrals are Horse Masters, because I see some people run commands in their list. For LIEKA, that is.
Right. The neutrals, when you see them in a red deck, it's generally you lean towards commands, Emperor's commands for that reduce the -2/1, so you get better clears that way because you don't have access to buffs. Maybe in the past we had seen Leia. I don't think that's as frequent now. And then, of course, Horse Masters to give you the extra mobility.
I would assume it's Horse Masters just because I see sometimes people play command, so I was just curious to know if you guys had seen it.
Trying to think back just to that previous game there, I don't recall seeing it, but we very well may have and just missed it.
He's going same side. Amoeba with yellow against red. Oh, actually, it's not red. It was or maybe I remember it wrong.
Yeah, this is a red-yellow coming out from Amoeba. I believe it was banned in our previous series.
Yeah. So, I guess I was right the other game where I thought it was more of a mid-range list, his red-yellow.
Meanwhile, on LIEKA's side, we do see early Axe Grinder always really nice. Get that early Collector down. Follow that up with a Brigand Ground Shaker. Even the Cypher coming down. LIEKA has a lot of options to control this early game.
I find it a bit interesting that Amoeba is going same side against red, because at least usually with the weaker creatures and with Mistral Guides, you want to avoid the side your opponent's going on and use the lands to dash your creatures.
Right, and even just having the flying in hand of the Emissary, generally the yellow wants to put a flying creature on the far side of the board where you don't have to worry as much about getting the lands underneath them. You have that insured economy coming down from that collection of the flyer. and you don't have to worry about it getting cleared as easily.
There can be only one!
So Cypher coming down for LIEKA is a pretty big threat into this Axe Grinder, but we do see the Soul Drain in hand for Amoeba. That's going to represent clearing this off pretty efficiently.
Yeah, I guess he's using the Soul Pack to heal up, I guess. I guess to mitigate the damage from it.
Right. If you do you do the Soul Pack first because the Soul Drain then heals you instead of what otherwise would be kind of losing the heal. Of course, very good sequencing from Amoeba as well. If you attack first, Cypher gains the health of the Axe Grinder, and then you lose the ability to clear it. But a phenomenal clear here for LIEKA, had a ton of resources in hand and has the cards to Grappling Hook, swing the board with that Axe Grinder, and then the Ground Shaker Cypher's Wrath easily clears off the Emissary.
I guess it's not over yet, but it's looking pretty bad for Amoeba right now.
Yeah, it's very difficult for Amoeba to stabilize from this position. Does have a good chunk of Faria to use here, so if he can get a couple decent clears back, he can maybe pull the game back into his favor. But in this situation, I mean, the Emissary coming down there, that's a value clear for the Ground Shaker, and then LIEKA reinforces with another creature back behind. The Axe Grinder probably just pushes more damage here.
I guess he doesn't really care about he's just going face. He thinks he can outrace him. Or at the very least put enough pressure on his orb that he can't deal with it.
Well, Morning Emissary, a really good pickup. Just in general, any flying creature would have been a good pickup there for Amoeba because it gets the buff. He's able to get this clear. But now the Brigands coming down are going to be buffed by that Herald as well, so LIEKA really putting the pressure on at this stage.
That's not gonna be quite enough. It's only gonna deal 2 damage. Maybe if he has a Choking Sand, but even then, is that even enough in the deck?
Thunderheel's a big investment at this point to not do anything. It does 2 damage to the Brigand, but that's not enough to clear it.
It would have been good if he didn't have the Herald buff, the LIEKA. He would have at least been able to clear the Brigand with a +1, but with the 1/1 buff on the Brigand, it makes it pretty awkward for Amoeba.
Yeah, and that Brigand coming back over if Amoeba was able to execute that steal is actually a pretty good card for Amoeba's side.
I mean, he's gonna have the clear now, which is good for Amoeba. With the Gyarados and +1 Theft.
Yeah, really good setup here. And LIEKA really doesn't have any ability to play around it. Usually in this situation, Amoeba has Telegraph. The +1, you're waiting for Gyarados. But if LIEKA doesn't play anything, he ends up in exactly the same situation as playing something. So the Brigand that LIEKA played there, he kind of had to because there was not really a better option. If he had had something bigger, then that creature could have come down. But yeah, it's just really awkward there.
I wonder if he's gonna double Flame Burst the Gyarados just to deny him the collection.
Looks like Firebomb Flame Burst instead, so you're still keeping some of that burst from hand available. Especially with Amoeba being down to 11 life, you really don't want to use those Flame Bursts on creatures when you can almost represent ending the game. And now in a very equal position for both players. Amoeba having the creature go down onto the board first, but LIEKA having kind of that one extra Faria pool built up. Another Flame Burst has to be used on a creature here just to ensure that there's nothing surviving.
Yeah, it seems to me like both players have very reactive cards. and yeah, like okay, I guess now LIEKA draw a creature, so we should be able to start pressuring again, or at the very least set up a collector.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to play for that economy game here.
Yeah, because if he just removes the Herald with a bomb slinger or something, it could be pretty bad for LIEKA.
When the 2 damage comes out from the Thunder Eel, that'll set up for potentially a Rakoacopter or Thunder Eel next turn from Amoeba's side to clear that off. Thunder Eel actually a pretty good target for the Firebomb that we saw come out from LIEKA earlier, but unfortunately he had to use that already, otherwise he would have gained some good value from it.
I guess he also hadn't seen the Thunder Eel, so he wasn't really expecting it.
And there's a Ground Shaker. That's kind of the next big point of power coming out from LIEKA's side. And kind of awkward there, LIEKA went for the Horsemaster, then draw. If he had gone for the draw first, maybe sees that Ground Shaker and just plays it right away, but Thunder Eel still does trade pretty well.
Yeah, that Gyarados that Amoeba had allowed him to come back into the game, or at the very least stabilized now.
Right, he at least set the board back to an even state, because LIEKA had to invest so many resources into clearing Gyarados, and now it's both been just whatever creature they can put out onto the board and hope that it survives. And neither player has really been able to get a foothold until about now, where we're starting to see creatures actually survive for more than a single turn.
I wonder if he's gonna Ground Shaker Flame Burst, but to at least try to gain the right side of the board.
I think you have to commit it, right? Because otherwise the Ground Shaker
Yes.
just dies too efficiently to the Eel. But big thing for Amoeba here, he has a flyer that can go into double collection. And LIEKA is now out of Flame Burst, so this will have to be ended entirely through creature damage to the orb, unless we get to a state where eventually Amoeba is fatiguing. Decent enough Rakoacopter here for Amoeba. That sets up if the Ground Shaker is going to attack into it, the Spirit Theft out of hand can be the extra damage to kill off the Ground Shaker, or depending on the way it lines up, maybe you go Rakoacopter in between.
I wonder if it was a bit too greedy to go into double collection, but then again, he has an expensive hand Amoeba, so maybe it's fine. Oh, and he should be able to Brigand with a +1, I guess. Or even an Axe Grinder.
Yeah, usually being at this range of a life total on Amoeba's side, you don't really want to Soul Pact and deal more damage to yourself against the burst that Red could have, but we've seen all 3 Flame Bursts from LIEKA already used, so you're still really not worried about just dying from hand damage at this stage.
I guess he has a couple of lines here on how he wants to clear that boss. You can either Thunder Eel or Copter. He could. No, he doesn't have the fairy. I was thinking if there was a way he could send the eel aggressive. Or maybe it does. No. He was one off. Because I was trying to look for a Mistral Guide, the eel line.
Right, even using the Soul Pack there, he was still 1 fairy short of
Yes.
getting the Mistral Guide. Cypher's Wrath picked up for LIEKA here means it will be a Rakoacopter +1 into Cypher's Wrath. But again, this double collection of the eel on the left side is pretty big. Both players are just, again, clearing whatever their opponent does. And Amoeba is ahead now because he has this double collector. Now sitting with 6, if he +1s into 7 Faria, versus LIEKA, who hasn't been able to have a creature collecting for the past few turns, sitting on a 0 pool and potentially nothing to play next turn.
I guess another thing to note as they're coming closer and closer to fatigue. So I guess Amoeba has more pressure to start putting creatures on the opponent's orb because he's the lower HP one.
Right, and we've already seen 2 Spirit Thefts and I think just 1 Soul Drain used. So depending on how many of each of those are in the deck, Amoeba's healing is also reduced.
He could have a decent. I guess he doesn't have the fit. He could go into double collect and set up for a Gyarados. I mean, he's gonna still need 1 damage to clear the 4/4.
Yeah, but even suiciding the Rokowacopter into the Mistral Guide, if that's the way that you choose to go, I think is fine at this stage. If it is going to be Rokowacopter and then Gyarados cleans up everything else.
I
Amoeba
think he
does
should.
pick up the last Nightmare.
I think he should have still stepped the copter into double collects because right now he might start thinking, why did he move the copter up? And might be more careful to play around the Gyarados.
The kind of problem for Amoeba at this stage is exactly the same problem that LIEKA had when it was the setup into Amoeba's Gyarados. If LIEKA is setting up for Gyarados, generally you either don't want to play something or you want to play something that's going to survive. And in this stage, Amoeba's only creature to get down out of hand is the Axe Grinders. So if you play one of those, it's going to die to Gyarados anyway. So you just don't play anything here. It just has to be Gyarados now.
Yes. I guess another reason he put it in double collect is because he used all of his flame bursts already, so he's gonna need like another creature to hit face. So it's better for him to start getting resources again.
Yeah, exactly. This Gyarados could have come down on the mountain that is on Amoeba's orb and set up, I'm going to hit you in your orb next turn, but that still puts your opponent to 3. And you do not have the extra burst in your deck anymore to be able to close out from there. So it really didn't matter. Gyarados was more of a control. I need to collect with it. If I can get the 2 collections on this next turn, I can maybe play something bigger that represents ending the game rather than just the 1 hit with Gyarados.
I don't think we've seen any fanatics. I was thinking if there was a way he could maybe double land towards the opponent's orb and drop a sandstone explorer to set up a creature that starts hitting the orb. But maybe that's too. I don't know.
You still could. You kind of want to do it from the desert that Amoeba just made and then go straight up 2. That gets you the closest for the Sandstone Explorer, but then you're still going Prairies this turn, Prairies next turn, so the Sandstone Explorer is close. And then maybe the turn after you go for a mountain up in the top left corner that sets up an Axe Grinder spot. It's a long investment, but at this stage you need it. You need something aggressive. Otherwise, LIEKA just sits back and waits for you to fatigue out.
I guess also Amoeba wasn't able to make much use of his Mistral Guides. He wasn't able to dash his Axe Griders over the ocean and get the well buffs. The 1/1 buff on the well. I think I saw 2 Mistral Guides played. Maybe he played a 3rd one, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember 2 as what was played so far for Amoeba. So maybe there's a 3rd one. The Soul Drain comes down, but so does the Soul Pact. So Amoeba's staying at 7 life for now, getting dangerously close to the fatigue, and really not changing what the current board state is to go aggressive and put his opponent on a clock. And we're now looking at a situation where there's maybe 1 more Soul Drain, maybe 1 more Spirit Theft in terms of keeping Amoeba alive from fatigue.
I'm curious, does he could either play an Axe Grinder or +1 boss. He even puts it more defensive. I guess he's not afraid anymore as much of Amoeba. At least he doesn't feel the pressure, nor is what I meant of hitting the opponent's orb.
Yeah, and even just playing that creature down, we're seeing Amoeba go for the +1 into Last Nightmare, and again doing nothing aggressive. So even though LIEKA's creature was cleared and he's not actually establishing anything on board, I think he's technically ahead because of fatigue being potentially the win condition now.
Another Soul Pact.
Yeah, Soul Pact is useless at this point because you can't push yourself closer and closer to death. And this Axe Grinder now being played aggressively by Amoeba is still 2 turns away from being able to hit the orb. The Sandstone Explorer actually can't even move because if a Ground Shaker comes down, Amoeba will have no way to clear it defensively.
Yeah, I think he should stay there. Or maybe move in if he's afraid that the opponent's going to make another mountain over the ocean near the orb.
Right, you could play another mountain from LIEKA's side. You could play another mountain beside the Rakoa Copter in that empty space, just above the desert there, and that pushes it 1 space further away from the Sandstone Explorer. So yes, Amoeba does move over exactly like you were saying. That represents killing off to the far side if LIEKA's going to go for that type of a play.
I guess he was afraid of bomb slingers, which is why he might have been considering not to step into the mountain range. But we haven't seen any bomb slingers at least, I think.
No, I don't think we've seen any bomb slingers from either of these decks.
So yeah, that could also be a reason why he's worried about bomb slingers. No, okay, the Soul Drain, but
Another Axe Grinder comes down here, but LIEKA went for that defensive Ground Shaker. It's just going to represent attacking into an Axe Grinder next turn.
yeah, I guess he also Amoeba decides that he doesn't need the Fairy anymore, so he just steps in to defend potentially from aggressive creatures. But I don't think LIEKA's gonna drop anything aggressive.
Nope, doesn't need to at this point.
No.
As long as LIEKA defends his orb well enough to kill off these creatures before they do any real damage to his orb, LIEKA will win this game through fatigue. There's only this Soul Drain. The last card in Amoeba's deck could be another Spirit Theft, I believe. But outside of that, it's the Soul Drain, which takes Amoeba to 8. That's 4 turns of fatigue, and there's nothing Amoeba can do about it.
If he has Spirit Theft, it could be even good this turn, because he can clear the Ground Shaker and clear the other Axe Grinder. And he could also drop the Ground Shaker aggressive because it's going to be neutral.
Looks like just another aggressive creature in the Mistral Guide. Now that does mean one of these will survive, and it kind of does end up being awkward land positioning for LIEKA to be able to go, oh, and the Horsemaster picks up means all of these will be able to be cleared now, and that will certainly be game.
Yeah, if it was a Spirit Theft his last card, I think he should have drawn and played it. He would have been in a much more decent spot.
I guess, yeah, you still would have played the Spirit Theft that turn, and it is.
Because you would have cleared the Ground Shaker and the Axe Grinder that was near your own Axe Grinders, I guess.
And you would have had a Ground Shaker on board instead of the Mistral Guide.
I mean, he can still put pressure on the opponent's orb, so it's not like it's over, per se. But it's going to be very hard for Amoeba, especially if the opponent starts dropping creatures.
The Ground Shaker has to come down, and it has to be directly beside. Do you just use everything here? You obviously don't use the Soul Pact, but...
I guess the Soul Drain is... You can think about keeping it, but I don't know. If you're afraid of...
The big thing is we see the Baldurian in hand.
Yes.
So if Amoeba just chooses to trade into the Horsemaster, it's perfectly fine. The Soul Drain then ends up popping the protection on Baldurian, and maybe Ground Shaker ends the game. But if Amoeba uses the Soul Drain on the Horsemaster, then the protection from Baldurian ensures that it will get the hammer, and then LIEKA can just end the game with the hammer destruction.
Yeah.
And a little bit of misordering there as well, because Amoeba wasn't sure of that he was going to use the Soul Drain, missed one heal. Not that it matters at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, it should be pretty over at this point. I don't see how Amoeba can win now.
Yeah, and now with moving that Rakowacopter away as well, there's no way for Amoeba to pop the protection and clear off Baldurian. Baldurian will step over, attack the orb, he'll get the Hammer of Destruction in any way that LIEKA wants to. He will end this game.
Yeah, he should have either cleared with the Rakwancopter or the... I guess he should have either used the Rakwancopter more defensive instead of going aggressive.
Very interesting back and forth from both players there because it was just clearing things away.
Okay, so he's gonna be bringing his Rakwan deck now. LIEKA, I guess.
The Rakoan can be kind of a risk into mono red. You have the Ground Shaker, Cypher's Wrath, a lot of ways to clear off the small creatures, especially the value that Garridan can have. We've seen it throughout the course of the day, being able to pick up huge momentum swings in the course of a game.
Yeah, I guess Amoeba will try to kind of bank on all the buffs and hope that he has a big unstoppable army that red can't deal with efficiently.
Right, Amoeba's deck we saw in the semifinal is more of like a red-green in the way that it plays out. It puts a lot of small Rakoans onto the board very efficiently, but then it really relies on the buffs coming out from the Emerald Salamander. And triple War Leader start's actually pretty decent. One of the things is red-green kind of favored a little bit into mono-red because they have access to the buffs that get their creatures big enough to take value trades into red.
I guess it could get problematic for Amoeba if LIEKA gets like a boss or something, because then Amoeba might have trouble dealing with it. But then again, he's gonna set up also for a Salamander, so it might not be that big of a problem.
Coa Cannoneer picked up could be really good to pick off the Axe Grinder, but you really don't want to use War Leaders as the sacrifice.
I wonder if he just makes it land defensive and waits for LIEKA to come to him.
Yeah, you really don't want to switch and go far side now. You want to continue to put everything clumped together so that you can get really good value out of your Salamanders. But if he plays it aggressively and goes for a War Leader, that sets up LIEKA trading with the Axe Grinder, Ground Shaker, Flame Firebomb combo. I think as LIEKA you clear the far one, or do you clear the close one?
Okay, he cleared that one. He could have cleared the far one, and so that way, I don't know. I guess because he has the other firebomb in hand, maybe he just wants healthy creatures on the right side. But then that kind of locks him out on his next turn to play the firebomb probably.
Yeah, if you clear the far side one there's always a potential that some buff can come down and actually allow the War Leader to kill off your Ground Shaker. It ends up being really awkward. I don't think it works in a lot of... I don't think it works a lot of the time that way, but it just ensures that you would have cleared the far side Collector. This way, like you said, it keeps the Ground Shaker healthier into whatever the follow-up is.
I wonder if he should have played the Cannoneer same side, because he could have maybe set up a Salamander clear there. So the Cannoneer will die, but you can then Salamander to kill the Ground Shaker.
The big thing there, though, is if you're expecting that your War Leader is going to die, which you generally wouldn't expect that your
Yes.
opponent has 2 firebombs, but the Cannoneer on the left ensures that you have a creature survive on the left to collect. Whereas if you
Yes.
played both on the right, your left side creature maybe gets cleared somehow, and then you only have 1 collection instead of what has now happened, and Amoeba has 2 collections.
Yes. I was mainly thinking about salamander value, so that is why I wasn't. I was thinking if he was gonna go for collection or for more salamander value. Because right now he can't clear the ground shaker there, and his 1/1 dies, I guess, for more or less free.
Right, and if Amoeba goes for a War Leader here, protected by the 1/1, or even if you go War Leader far side, if LIEKA has any way to clear off the 1/1 without having to use the ground shaker, you're in a lot of trouble.
I guess he makes his 5th mountain, hits into the 1/1, steps on the mountain, hits into the 1/1, and drops the axe behind. But which then sets up for a salamander turn for Amoeba, where he can clear the ground shaker.
Yeah, you have to move into such a risky spot in order to do that. But the Axe Grinder just looks so good to play the extra. Is it worth playing the extra mountain in between the wells and still playing the Axe Grinder there? So you get it as the 5/4, but your creatures are still a little more protected?
I guess if you think that you can't pressure as much, you could play it more into the wells, and but I guess he doesn't respect the buffs that Amoeba will be dropping now. He could even buff the Cannoneer because he doesn't need the Salamander hitting the ground shaker.
Right, the +2/+2 onto the War Leader will be enough to clear the ground shaker here that you don't need to play the Salamander on that side. Reveler's a good pickup, but it would have been nicer to be the other way around.
Oh, he doesn't play the. I guess he wants to keep the Salamander.
Oh, that's a huge buff to get it onto the Reveler. Now, if you play the Reveler on the right side, if LIEKA goes for a value trade, you still kill off the Axe Grinder. If that buff from the War Leader had hit the Rakoacopter instead, Reveler coming down as a 1 attack doesn't represent the same power level of being able to clear off the Axe Grinder in a value trade.
I guess he wants to keep his AoE for other creatures to have a bigger swing in turns. So, which is why he played the Guidance probably instead of the Salamander.
A big full clear comes out from LIEKA, but a lot of resources invested into that.
Interesting. He drew. I guess he has lots of tokens, so I guess drawing was okay. I was thinking of maybe +1ing because he had an expensive hand.
And now we see LIEKA has to go for that kind of board reset again. Both players really going to be in parity here. Champion, you really don't want to play just as a 5/5, but maybe it is worth it just to put the pressure on. If you're able to go Champion, dash up, and contest the Herald of War into an aggressive land next turn that gets you a good Salamander or a good Rakoacopter, you can actually really put the pressure on as an Amoeba here.
Yeah, I think the 5/5 is gonna be enough, at least for now. Yeah, it forces your opponent to have, I guess, a more efficient. Yeah, it forces him to have removal, I guess, to be able to properly deal with this. And he couldn't ground shaker because he didn't have the Feria for it.
Yeah, it was very precise timing on Amoeba going for a play there that LIEKA had absolutely no way to respond to efficiently. Cannoneer picked up actually means Amoeba could go for like Rakoacopter Cannoneer if he wanted to. Not really that great because you don't really want to sacrifice Rakoacopters. Salamander can buff your creatures, and then you just clear the Herald of War with the champion, potentially. Yeah, and that's what
yeah, you can go.
Amoeba goes for.
Yeah, I was thinking if he would have collected and leave the 5/5 as a 5/1. And potentially set up the Salamander for another turn, but I guess he saw the Ground Shaker coming down.
Yeah, but exactly like you said, it was the perfect play from Amoeba to go for the 5/5 champion in the turn where LIEKA couldn't punish it. If
Yes.
LIEKA had any Faria built up, he would have been able to potentially +1 or just play Ground Shaker outright with the Herald of War. And this entire snowball of the Salamander then coming down, any of this pressure that's now being exerted by Amoeba would have been shut down that turn. So it was about finding exactly when Amoeba was able to go for that type of play.
The 4 HPs are a bit awkward for LIEKA to deal with at the moment. I guess he has 4 attack creatures, but he doesn't have the Faria to play everything. And just Amoeba's gonna keep dropping creatures one by one. So it's gonna be hard for LIEKA to put pressure now onto the enemy board.
Yeah, Amoeba can go for another Salamander here if he wants to. He can grappling hook and attack with the Rakoacopter, and then put it on the mountain so that it collects, and then play an aggressive land and go for a Salamander that'll clear the Ground Shaker and buff his Rakoacopter even more. Otherwise, grappling hook Cannoneer. You can Salamander first and then grappling hook if you want to have the extra damage and just clear it outright. There's a lot of options for Amoeba at this stage, and anything that LIEKA plays right now is just getting cleared immediately.
Yeah, I think Cannoneer was an option. With Hook and Cannoneer, you place both of them aggressive, and next turn you set up for a Salamander to hit face twice. Oh, actually, he already played the Salamander. Yeah, he played. I mean, he played it now, but he could have set up for a Salamander next turn with an aggressive Cannoneer and an aggressive Rakwan.
Right, could have used the grappling hook exactly the same way, but used the Cannoneer as the finishing damage, and then
Yes.
that sets you up next turn for the Salamander to buff your Cannoneer and Rakoacopter instead of having played the Salamander this turn. Underground Boss comes down, so LIEKA just hoping to get some of that combat trigger back so that he can have the Fairy to be able to play anything next turn. But, I mean, we see the resources in hand. Amoeba can go for Rakoacopter or Cannoneer as the finish to the Underground Boss after he attacks him with the Salamander here.
He could have played the Copter maybe, but I guess he wanted to guarantee the Collector. A smaller Collector, I guess, on the left side. Because I was thinking with the Copter, you could pressure other creatures that LIEKA wants to drop.
There can be only one!
And Cypher coming down potentially could be good into the Salamanders. If it can kill one of them, it gains a lot of life that then makes it very difficult to deal with. But because of just the vast amount of Faria that Amoeba now has and the pressure that he has onto the board, Rakoacopter and the 4/2 Salamander just kills off Cypher, no issues.
Yeah, he could also just Gyarados aggressive. Like, most of his deck is reactive. Oh, okay.
Oh, I really don't like that. That's such a defensive play at this stage when you
he
can set
could've-
your opponent on a 2-turn
yeah.
clock.
He could have also kept the Rakwan Copter where it was, even if he decided to do that line. So he has a champion and a Copter that pressure his orb.
Right. Doesn't end up mattering in the end because LIEKA has such a massive advantage at that stage. Whether he's making an aggressive or a defensive play, he's eventually going to win that game because there's just nothing that Amoeba could do. Or sorry, that LIEKA could do there.
Yeah. I guess Amoeba chose well, because he had to go with a list that could contest green. I mean red. Well, with the bigger creatures, I guess. Since red, at least usually they can't as efficiently deal with big HP creatures, since most of their removal is at the 1-to-1 ratio of Feria and damage. And yeah, most of the green cards he has, like you have much more HP. The creatures have much more life than you're paying Feria for them.
We see more red coming out of LIEKA. I believe I did see a Yakapult in there. I think it's more of a green-red, I believe. But I didn't catch all of the cards that were in the mulligan there from LIEKA.
Yeah, I didn't catch all the cards either. I guess both players have Gyarados, so it might be interesting to see if the one who plays Gyarados last wins, or even the first one to play Gyarados wins.
Yes, this, as we've seen a couple times throughout our earlier series in the day, could very much be a game that swings momentum potentially a couple times. If the first player can get a really good Gyarados and clear off a lot of these little tokens, all the little Rakoans, and then if the second player can respond to that with a board wipe of their own. Currently, I think Amoeba potentially is set up the best right now. He's going to be able to have that early Emerald Salamander, get the buffs going. But yeah, LIEKA, again, the Gyarados, if he can get the right play to that, maybe he can take a big swing.
I guess he's thinking about whether he sacrifices his Raquan or not to kill the Reveler, but yeah, okay, he doesn't. Because he might have been trying to play around buffs on the Reveler, but right now he's at only 2 lands, so he doesn't have to worry about the Salamander, for example.
Right, with the hand that he currently has, if you're going to use the Cannoneer on anything, you're going to sacrifice the Shield Mates. So you want to do that before you end up doing the Salamander, so you're not wasting buffs. You get the buff onto the Cannoneer instead of what would be the 4/4 that you're going to sacrifice anyway. But like you said, Amoeba doesn't have the lands to be able to Salamander next turn, so he doesn't have to worry about going for that play on the previous turn. And now actually may be rewarded for it, because he now could use the Cannoneer to kill off the Axe Grinder instead.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to think about is, do you save up for Gyarados and let the Axe Grinder collect? Because the Gyarados is going to be a much more efficient clear.
And then you can still go for both if you wanted, right?
Yeah, and
You could have gone the Cannoneer on that turn, and then still had 10 Feria next turn for Gyarados. Amoeba here setting up, it looks like, for Gyarados plus Cannoneer on the following turn to kill off everything on LIEKA's side of the board.
yeah, I guess LIEKA is also gonna get punished for not making a more earlier Salamander, because he's gonna have his board cleared.
Yeah, and potentially that turn LIEKA could have gone Salamander. He made a lake instead of a forest.
I think he should collect, but I guess he wants the Gyarados more aggressive.
I think the mountain spot that Amoeba has is perfect for Gyarados right now.
Yes.
It sets up that double collection angle that you always want to have with the charge 2 creatures. And then you just step the Shield Mates back.
Oh, he made a mistake, I think.
Oh, so he's not going to go for the Gyarados. Oh, he's not even going to Salamander either.
Yeah. I think he should have Gyarados. He had a decent board for it.
And now super punished. LIEKA going for the Gyarados. The Shield Mates has now been sacrificed by Amoeba, so it's not even like the 1/1 survives afterwards. And the Cypher's Wrath to finish off the War Leader. A huge swing for LIEKA here in what was looking very favored towards Amoeba making that big swing play.
I guess he goes for more of a low impact Gyarados as more of a tempo play here. Does he then champion? Chieftain, I mean, as a collector.
+1 Rakoa Copter to clear off the... Yeah, okay. I think this is a little better to get that full clear.
Yes.
But we still see the Gyarados from LIEKA's side survive. That 6-3 on the far side, going to continue to collect and give LIEKA more resources to be able to continue to play anything he wants in this game. He even could go for the Tiki Caretaker and the Runen's Guidance. That puts Gyarados to 10 attack. And LIEKA can actually start to threaten some damage to the orb here if Amoeba's not careful.
I wonder if he's gonna potentially put pressure by stepping on the lake, making a mountain and dashing in the chieftain. And then I guess moving up the Gyarados, but then you leave your orb exposed to the enemy Gyarados.
Yeah, it's very difficult for Amoeba right now on how quickly he thinks he can end the game versus if he thinks that LIEKA is going to attempt to end the game quicker. Because like you said, he can put the Rakoa Copter up, have the Chieftain there. That's 8 potential damage next turn. If you move Gyarados forward, that's 15, and you have a buff, maybe another Rakoa Copter, or Chieftain, sorry, in hand. There's ways that Amoeba maybe finds a 2-turn lethal here. But if he leaves himself exposed and that Gyarados goes fully aggressive from LIEKA's side, there's a way that Amoeba can also lose the game. So it's very important, I think, to leave Gyarados in this position because it can be that defensive option if you need it.
Yeah, I was thinking about Salamander lines, but this works out too. He gets to have the defensive Gyarados and the Salamander line also to put more pressure on the opponent's orb next turn.
Yeah, and now LIEKA really not finding a lot of options. Reveler, Salamander, Caretaker, and Caretaker in the wrong order misses the buff from the Salamander as well. But I think you... Is he going to buff... Oh, he's going to buff Gyarados instead, so... Definitely a bit of missed ordering there from LIEKA because he could have got a +2/+2 onto the Caretaker. I thought he was maybe going to buff the Salamander afterwards to have it a little tankier, but... Going for...
Yeah, if he wasn't gonna buff the Salamander, then yeah, he definitely made a mistake. I don't know if he's gonna have enough damage to because he hit his face, but I remember him. I don't know if he's running Flame Bursts, because I'm not sure if it's really worth it to hit the face here.
You don't necessarily need Flame Burst when the Cannoneers exist, though. So maybe it's just looking for Cannoneer outs later on in the game.
Did he run Deserts? Or was this just a triple color deck?
Hasn't played any yet, so maybe it isn't any Deserts being played. But LIEKA also made the Lake, and I don't think we've seen anything played that required the Lake so far.
Yeah, that 2 buff would have mattered actually, because he could have used it to kill the Salamander. Now the Salamander just value trades into the tree.
Yeah, exactly. This Tiki Caretaker right now should be a 5/5 at this point. Should have got the buff from the Salamander previously. And now I don't know that Amoeba doesn't just double buff and clear everything out. Cannoneer would be good here, but you don't really want to sacrifice your 6/2. I guess you could step up Guidance. Oh, gonna do it this way as well. I was thinking maybe to Guidance the Salamander to attack in, have the 6 damage go to the orb, and then sacrifice that Chieftain with the Rakoa Cannoneer to kill off the 3/3 Caretaker, but it still just didn't work kind of the way that you would like. Yeah, but Amoeba has enough pressure here. There's no aggressive land for LIEKA to try to end the game.
Yeah, I guess he's just stalling now. I'm not sure it's gonna be enough though.
The big thing is as well, because the Ruden's Guidance is being played from Amoeba's side, if LIEKA was to make a couple aggressive lands down the left side and set up for an Axe Grinder next turn, trying to go for like a 2-turn setup, the Axe Grinder attacking in twice for the 10 damage, Amoeba just had that healing, and that would have ended the game anyway. But 11 damage pushed through now, LIEKA down to 9, and it looks like he will not have any way to stop Amoeba from ending the game next turn.
Yeah, I think he should have. LIEKA should have kept the Gyarados as a defender. He should have just went to collect, or I mean, like he should have just stepped back down the mountain and have it defend there, or even just as a collector, if he needed to. I don't think hitting the face was necessary.
Right, in that turn where he pushed 8 damage, it still left Gyarados in a position where it just died to Amoeba's Gyarados. Like, it wasn't like you were putting enough buffs in that it survived, and it forced another defensive buff that was into Gyarados that was, you know, it forced something else defensive from your opponent. LIEKA going for that aggressive attack really didn't achieve anything in the end, so we will see LIEKA down to his final deck here. This is for the 3rd place. Amoeba on match point. Just the blue left for LIEKA here.
I'm curious to see if the blue can go through Amoeba's defenses. I feel it's gonna be pretty hard. If yeah, if Amoeba, yeah, if Amoeba gets the board early on, it's gonna be very hard for LIEKA to win this. But I guess LIEKA, if he's running lots of movement tricks, he might have a chance of getting the early board and then dominating from there.
And that to be said as well, if LIEKA is able to take this game, the final game is a yellow. 30 yellow cards at a 2.4 is potentially just a yellow rush. And that'll be very interesting to see which one comes out on top if it is able to extend to that game number 5. But here we are, the blue versus the Rakoans on Amoeba's side. Looks like a blue 7's coming out from LIEKA.
Interesting. He threw away the 2-1, the shield mates, which could be good against blue, I feel, personally. I guess he valued the war leader's HP more.
It definitely seems like the war leaders are picking up a lot of favor from Rakoan players right now. A lot of the previous Rakoan decks that we were seeing were very heavily favored towards just flooding small token creatures out onto the board. But the war leaders definitely seem like they're now favored in the early game.
Yeah, I mean, it's in part because it takes a bit of time to get the value of the war leader, and let's say compared to a war machine, which is a 4/4, it has more, at least in terms of the damage, it can reach into, it can, I guess, threaten more creatures. So people want the more immediate value. So, and also, I guess Mino and myself maybe popularized it a bit. The war leaders.
We do see a pretty heavy hand coming out for Amoeba here. War leaders potentially setting up into a salamander next turn, and then you can threaten the creatures that are going to come down onto the left side here. A couple turns before that champion's really going to be effective.
I wonder if you just salamander here. So you move everything to the left and you salamander. I mean, you could do it like this, but I would have maybe preferred the 2/5 to be closer to the into the action.
Yeah, the setup here of not moving everything, or salamander first instead of move everything first, means that you're that much further away. Like, you've got a 5/7 now in a position where it's probably not going to fight things for at least maybe 3 turns. And the salamander is an extra turn away from fighting as well.
Yes.
So it does end up being a little awkward, but even just the pressure of the 5/7 here is representing enough from Amoeba's side to hold LIEKA back at least for another turn or two.
The other thing is he also had hook, so the 5/7 that was on the right, he could have set it up for a hook on the 4/4.
Yeah, it now would be standing where the Salamander currently is. You could have moved everything out of the way and used a grappling hook. Instead of now, which is grappling hook onto Salamander, which doesn't achieve anything. And now it's kind of awkward for Amoeba. He doesn't have the ability to clear anything on this turn. And we can see what's in LIEKA's hand. Going for a swing of Aurora and an Emperor's Command will clear the 5/7 War Leader here. Wondering if that Time of Legends is going to pull anything.
Beirut, I suppose, because he's blue 7s.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's just to tutor Aurora out so you can get that big swing turn when you need it as a 6/6. But if that's able to pull a Beru and LIEKA's able to actually control this board a little more,
Would you like
Beru can actually destroy all of these lands and take the game because Amoeba won't be able to play anything.
Another, I guess, a cool thing with the Time of Legends is if he's running commanders, he can pull out the Beirut and flip the commanders that way.
Right. Also, now that he's played Gabriel Warden, can set up for drawing what would be a guaranteed another 7-drop card. Oh.
Wow. So I guess it was only to tutor Aurora.
Yeah, Time of Legends only in there to tutor Aurora, but goes for add one random legend to your hand and gets Aurora off of it. That is potentially one of the best.
Yeah, I wonder if Abraham had anything to do with it.
We see another Salamander come down. That'll let the first Salamander clear off. And very big as well, the War Leader clearing off Aurora there. If Amoeba wasn't able to make that happen, the Aurora in hand for LIEKA could have turned the one that was on board into a 6/6. That would have been a pretty big swing as well. Turning a 4/6 into a 6/6 really doesn't feel that impactful, but if you can turn a 1/1, that's a really big play.
I think I saw Frogify's and LIEKA's blue. But I don't know if drawing for it is going to be worth it. Because it feels a bit risky. But maybe that he doesn't have a choice. Or he could just try to swarm himself.
Tough at this stage for LIEKA right now because if he's able to get another 7-cost card, okay, Phantasm's a great draw. Can't play it right now, but he can play slower at this stage to get another Archon down onto the board. I guess not going to play anything, go for a Mirror Phantasm next turn, but potentially LIEKA has big swings now with the fact that Gabriel Archon will be a 4-mana 6/6.
I wonder if killing that 2/1 was necessary, but I guess he plays around another Salamander.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either there, though, because if the War Leader steps up, Mirror Phantasm on the War Leader plus the Emperor's Command means your Gabriel Warden could have traded into that. So having used the command means that LIEKA now, I think, even if he goes for the Phantasm, isn't really going to be able to clear the War Leader here.
Yeah, not to mention we already saw 2, I guess, Salamanders, so he didn't have to worry about another Salamander, at least anytime soon.
You at least expect that that's pretty unlikely.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but now in this position, your Mirror Phantasm onto the 8/8 means you still have to deal with a 6/5 instead of having kept the Emperor's Command in hand, which would now be able to trade. So I think a pretty big mistake from LIEKA having used that to kill off the Salamander previously.
I mean, he could have also used the Archon to trade in, so he could have even kept the command, but the way he ordered his movements made it now it's a bit awkward. And I guess also the champion makes it awkward too for him. Not the champion. I mean the chieftain.
Yeah. Yeah, and now I think we're going to see the Rakowacopter come down. That'll allow the Phantasm still going to clear the Gabriel Warden. The Chieftain can step down a space, and then the Salamander will be a 3/5 attacking into the 5/5 Phantasm between the wells here, and you set up your Rakowacopter on the top side. Misses the one collection, but it's a pretty good